what is the BOJ's message from what you've seen from the headlines so far? Is there a tilt at least towards the downside here when it comes to where policy might be going?
Well, actually, Japan's economy has been weak in manufacturing sector, but overall, consumption and also fixed investment has been quite resilient. So overall, I don't think we are nowhere near recession, and BOJ acknowledged that. But at the same time, there are a lot of downside risks, particularly around global economy. One of them is obviously a China-US trade issue, and also some other political tensions heightened. So I think it is very reasonable for BOJ to make some statement about acknowledging the perception about downside risk at this moment.
Do you think to a certain extent, though, in acknowledging the downside risk and acknowledging the obvious, and again, we did have that industrial production report that was pretty weak. There's a pretty strong drop. Are they just to a certain extent placating the markets? Are they trying to say, look, guys, we know what you are looking for, and you know that we really can't do anything about it right now?
Yes, I think it is, certainly is. I think that is actually one-on-one of central bank communication. Try to be lenient to the market and exactly describe what they perceive about the global economy and domestic economy. I think that is the very important first step for any credible communication for central bank.
You know, a lot of speculation, a lot of talk going into this report that the BOJ, even though, as you said, they think the economy is doing okay. Why even try to add more stimulus right now when those tools are so precious, and you've got to wait in case you really need to do something with Governor Kuroda, with the BOJ signaling again, if additional easing is really needed, we'll go for it. We can. Do you agree with that?
Well, actually, that is basically very important part of the communication, as I mentioned. But the problem with the BOJ is that they don't have any credibly effective measures anymore left in their hands. So this is a very, very challenging situation for the BOJ to actually deliver the further monetary easing. But actually, more broadly speaking, I think Mr. Abe also acknowledged the same situation with the BOJ. And actually, last week, after the upper house election, Prime Minister Abe announced that he was pretty much ready to do whatever it takes to support the economy when it needed. So I think that message is much more important in the context of Japan's economy, and the BOJ is kind of trying to be more cooperative for the government posture on that kind of the communication. I think that combination will be really providing some confidence in the economy that Japan's economy is not going to slip into recession.
You know, because I want to give you credit for a phrase I think you've coined. I love it, that it's actually the Abe put now on fiscal policy that matters to the markets, not the Kuroda put, because that's where the firepower is now. Yeah,
exactly. I think the firepower is still there in the government, but not anymore in the BOJ. But at the same time, BOJ has to continue to pretend that they still have some ammunition in their hand. So this kind of the balance of communication and actual implementation possible by the government, I think this will be the best combination at this moment for for Japan's economy. And Kuroda Abe put rather than Kuroda put. It's going to be much more workable and much more important from now on.
That's going to make a very good tweet. Hashtag Abe put.
Yeah.
Now, going into this meeting, there was a lot of talk about the yen. And Bank of Japan, it happened in mid-2010, where they had a policy decision before the Fed, which they usually don't. They thought the Fed was going to slow down on the stimulus, and they kept policy unchanged. The Fed didn't. The Fed resumed the stimulus. They had to have an emergency meeting to make up for that. Nothing like that today, but how much does the interconnection between ECB and Fed and the BOJ, with two big banks getting ready to add stimulus and the BOJ can't do anything, how strong is that? Is that overdone, do you think?
Well, actually, situation depends on case. At this moment, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about global economy, but still, overall, global economy is doing just fine. But in the case of United States, Federal Reserve is supposed to be delivering some of the maybe 25 basis point rate cut tomorrow. That is regarded as an insurance cut. It's not really combating against any downside momentum being created in the U.S. economy. So as far as U.S. economy is kept going to some extent, I think the general risk-on momentum in the financial market is not going to disappearing. In that context, I think BOJ can still afford to wait and see to see exactly what global economy is going to bring out going forward.
Does this mean the Bank of Japan is not going to make a policy change for years? Yeah. Or is there a chance that the Fed and the ECB start adjusting their approach to that 2% inflation target, step back a bit, which would give the BOJ the chance to step back and maybe start dialing back on some of the stimulus if it's not needed any longer?
Well, you are really talking about the objective itself, 2% inflation. I think in the current global environment, there's no chance for the BOJ or ECB or Federal Reserve or any other central banks to come up with a drastic idea to change the objective of 2% inflation. So BOJ has to cope with the situation that they are not able to deliver 2%, but still they have to stick to the objective for some time to come. This is very challenging, but this is exactly what BOJ has to do. Probably I think they're going to continue to be super patient, waiting for the inflation rate to come up with more level, which is closer to what they would like to see, and they try to minimize the side effect in the meantime.
It was just a domestic economy. It was just inflation that central bankers had to be focused on. It wouldn't seem such a big deal, but you've got more and more negative yields on bonds every day.
Right.
You've got more and more investors reaching for yield. The BOJ even mentions in its report, close attention has to be paid to the financial system. That's where more and more people see the risk, not that somehow inflation spikes up, but that financial instability is what increases and puts banks and economies on shakier ground. Are you concerned about that?
I am a little bit concerned about the current situation where most of the central bank pursue the accommodative monetary policy just for the purpose of 2% inflation target. This is not so constructive in terms of the more balanced approach from policy side. I think eventually, maybe not now, but eventually, how to cope with 2% inflation target across the central bank should be discussed much more deeply, and how to make good balance between financial stability and price stability. I think that would be a very, very great agenda for maybe 5 or 10 years to come.
Yeah. You're not concerned about the risk being bigger than that before 5 to 10 years get here? I mean, I think that's the concern people have. So much liquidity still being pushed into this global system. Growth is on track, so you don't have inflation at 2%. It just seems at some point that's what people think. Maybe the balance tips in a way we don't expect now, but down the road it could.
I think your concern is very legitimate. The difficulty is that nobody can really prove that financial stability risk is greater than price stability risk. But everything is kind of the how to make strike balance. So I think from that kind of risk management view, the policy should be deepened in their contents and essence and the underlying philosophy to how to cope with between those two things balance.
When the story is written about yield curve control, about Haruki Kuroda and what he's done, will you and others say it was a great success? Japan's economy came out of deflation. Japan's economy continues to grow. Stocks are doing well, or not?
Well, it is part of the story. For the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of good things also happen rather than just one single issue of monetary policy. Global economy has been generally benign for the last 5 or 6 years, and also Abenomics third arrow, although not so conspicuous, still is there. And also, cyclical speaking, economy has been in a fairly good shape in a cyclical point of view. So I think there are a lot of other things rather than monetary policy alone. So it's very difficult to make precise evaluation on that.
What's the biggest risk that the Bank of Japan, when they're looking at a Japanese economy, maybe even global economy, what's the biggest risk right now to their outlook?
Well, just like being stated by the BOJ statement today, I think the U.S.-China trade tension is going to be a very, very big risk, not for a short time, but also more long-term sustainability of global financial and economic system.